What would you do if the adventure you left your family for suddenly turned into a nightmare? Can you ever go back after betraying your husband and children for someone dangerous, only to return home and find legal documents waiting for you at the door? This is my story of how my search for excitement cost me everything, except my own twisted version of the truth. I stared at the ceiling of our suburban bedroom, listening to Harlan's rhythmic breathing beside me. 34 years old, and this was my life. Predictable, safe, suffocating. The same beige walls, the same routine, the same man who kissed my forehead every morning before heading to his accounting firm downtown. "Morning, Eve," Harlan mumbled, rolling over to check his phone. Even his wake-up routine was identical every single day. Coffee first, shower second, kiss goodbye third, like clockwork. "It's Evadne," I corrected him for the 1,000th time, though I knew he'd forget again tomorrow. He'd been calling me Eve since we started dating 12 years ago, claiming my full name was too fancy for everyday use. "Right, sorry." He padded toward the bathroom, already mentally reviewing his client meetings. I could tell by the way his shoulders tensed, always thinking about work, never about us, never about me. Downstairs, our 8-year-old daughter Ava was methodically eating her cereal while reading a book about horses. Our 6-year-old son Noah sat beside her, arranging his Cheerios into perfect rows before eating them one by one. Even my children had fallen into the same mind-numbing patterns that defined our household. "Mom, can you drive us to school today?" Ava asked without looking up from her book. "Dad said he has an early meeting." "Of course, sweetheart," I forced a smile, though the thought of another school drop-off filled me with dread. The same parking lot, the same conversations with other mothers about bake sales and soccer practices. When had my life become so small? My phone buzzed with a text from my mother, Celia. "Lunch today? You sounded stressed yesterday." At least someone noticed I was drowning in this suburban wasteland. My mother-in-law Margot certainly didn't care about my happiness. She'd made that clear from the moment Harlan brought me home. "She's not right for you," I'd overheard her telling him before our wedding. "Too restless, too selfish." Maybe she was right about the restless part. At my job as an office administrator for a small consulting firm, I went through the motions of filing, scheduling, and answering phones. The work was mind-numbing, but it paid decent money and had flexible hours that worked around the kids' schedules. Harlan always praised me for being practical about my career choices, which somehow made it worse. "Evadne, could you handle the new client intake forms?" my boss asked, dropping a stack of papers on my desk. "Absolutely," I replied, though inside I was screaming. More forms, more routine, more of the same endless cycle that had become my existence. That afternoon, everything changed. The new client was named Caleb Voss, and when he walked into our office, the air seemed to shift. Tall, with dark hair and eyes that held secrets, he moved with a confidence that made everyone else seem like they were sleepwalking through life. When he shook my hand, his grip lingered just a moment too long. "Pleasure to meet you, Evadne," he said, pronouncing my name correctly without being told. "Beautiful name for a beautiful woman." Heat rushed to my cheeks. When was the last time Harlan had called me beautiful? When was the last time anyone had looked at me like I was worth noticing? "Thank you," I managed, trying to keep my voice professional. "Let me get your paperwork started." As I typed his information, I learned he was 39, recently relocated from Chicago, and working as a freelance security consultant. There was something magnetic about him, something dangerous that made my pulse quicken in a way it hadn't in years. "So, Evadne," he said, leaning against my desk, "what does a woman like you do for fun in this town?" The question caught me off guard. Fun? I couldn't remember the last time I'd done something purely for enjoyment. I have 2 children, so mostly family activities." "That's sweet, but I asked about you. What do you like to do?" I stared at him, realizing I didn't have an answer. Somewhere along the way, I'd stopped being Evadne and become just Mom and Harlan's wife. I used to love trying new restaurants, I said finally. Exploring the city, going to art galleries, staying up late talking about books and movies and life. Used to? His eyes held genuine interest. What happened? Life happened. Responsibilities. You know how it is. No, I don't, he said softly. I think people use responsibilities as an excuse to stop living, but maybe that's just me. That evening, I sat through another family dinner where Harlan discussed his day in excruciating detail while the kids pushed vegetables around their plates. The conversation was as predictable as everything else in our house. "How was your day, honey?" Harlan asked, the same question he'd asked every night for 12 years. "Fine," I replied, the same answer I'd given for the past several years. But tonight, it felt like a lie. Today hadn't been fine, it had been awakening. After the kids were in bed, Harlan settled into his recliner with his laptop, reviewing client files. I sat on the couch pretending to read, but my mind kept drifting to Caleb's question. What happened to the woman who loved exploring and staying up late talking about life? "Harlan," I said suddenly, "when was the last time we went somewhere new together? Just the two of us?" He looked up from his screen, blinking like I'd spoken in a foreign language. "What do you mean?" "I mean, when did we stop being adventurous? When did we stop talking about anything besides work and the kids? Eve, we have responsibilities. We can't just run around like we're 22 anymore." There it was again, responsibilities as the excuse for letting our marriage flatline. "But don't you miss it? Don't you miss us?" "I don't know what you want me to say." He turned back to his laptop. "We have a good life. We're stable, the kids are happy, we have a nice house. Isn't that enough?" Before we dive deeper into this story, I have one small request. Please subscribe, drop a like, comment, and hit that hype button to boost this channel so more people can discover these incredible stories. Enough. The word hit me like a slap. When had I started settling for enough? My phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number. "It was lovely meeting you today. Hope we can continue our conversation soon. Caleb." I stared at the message, my heart pounding. This was dangerous territory, but for the first time in years, I felt truly alive. I glanced at Harlan, still absorbed in his work, completely unaware that his wife was suffocating in their perfect suburban life. Instead of responding to Caleb, I typed a goodnight text to Harlan. "Going to bed early. Love you." But as I climbed the stairs, I deleted the message without sending it. Then I opened Caleb's text and typed back, "It was lovely meeting you too." I hit send before I could change my mind, then quickly deleted both messages from my phone. What Harlan didn't know wouldn't hurt him, right? This was just conversation, just someone who saw me as more than a wife and mother, just the beginning of everything falling apart. The next morning, I found myself spending extra time getting ready for work. I chose a dress that actually flattered my figure instead of my usual conservative blouses. And I even put on makeup, real makeup, not just the quick swipe of lip gloss I'd been defaulting to for months. "You look nice," Harlan said, glancing up from his coffee. "Special occasion?" "Just felt like making an effort," I replied, avoiding his eyes. It wasn't technically a lie, but the guilt still twisted in my stomach. At the office, I kept glancing toward the door, wondering if Caleb would stop by. He didn't, but around lunchtime, my phone buzzed with another text. "Free for coffee this afternoon? I know a great little place downtown." My fingers hovered over the keyboard. This was crossing a line, and I knew it, but the alternative was another afternoon of filing and another evening of Harlan's predictable routine. "I can get away around 3, I typed back. The downtown bistro Caleb chose was exactly the kind of place Harlan would never think to take me. Intimate lighting, eclectic art on the walls, the kind of atmosphere that invited long conversations. I spotted him immediately, sitting in a corner booth, and my pulse quickened. You came, he said, standing to greet me. I wasn't sure you would. Neither was I admitted, sliding into the booth across from him. Honesty. I like that. He signaled the waitress. So, Evadne, tell me about your life. The real version, not the polite small talk version. Something about his direct gaze made me want to tell him everything. You really want to know? I wouldn't ask if I didn't. So I told him. About feeling invisible in my own home. About dreams I'd given up. About the woman I used to be before I became defined entirely by my relationships to other people. He listened without judgment, asking questions that showed he was actually paying attention. Your husband sounds like a good man, he said finally. He is, I replied quickly, then felt compelled to add, but good isn't the same as alive. He's so focused on security and stability that he's forgotten how to live. And you, have you forgotten how to live? The question hung between us like a challenge. I'm here, aren't I? Yes, you are. His smile was warm and dangerous. So, what would living look like for you? We talked for 2 hours, about books, about travel, about the kinds of deep philosophical questions that Harlan would dismiss as impractical. Caleb had stories. He'd lived in 6 different cities, worked jobs ranging from bartender to private investigator to his current security consulting. He'd made mistakes, taken risks, actually experienced life instead of just enduring it. I should go, I said finally, checking my phone. I need to pick up the kids soon. Of course. He reached across the table and touched my hand briefly. Thank you for this. It's been a long time since I've had a real conversation with someone. Me too, I whispered. Walking back to my car, I felt like I was floating. When was the last time someone had been genuinely interested in my thoughts, my dreams, my opinions about anything more substantial than grocery lists and school schedules? That evening, Harlan was late getting home from work. The kids were already eating dinner when he finally walked through the door, looking harried. Sorry, he said, loosening his tie. The Morrison account is a disaster, and I had to stay late to fix their quarterly projections. It's fine, I said, though part of me wondered why he never seemed to notice that I'd rearranged my entire day around his schedule for years. How was your day otherwise? Busy. You know how it is. He sat down and immediately started scrolling through his phone while eating. Oh, by the way, my mother called. She wants to have dinner this weekend. I suppressed a groan. Margot Greer had never liked me, and she'd made increasingly little effort to hide it over the years. Both of us, or just you? All of us. Family dinner. He looked up from his phone. You don't mind, do you? Would it matter if I did? Eve, don't be dramatic. She's my mother. There it was again. My feelings dismissed as dramatic whenever they inconvenienced him. Fine. We'll go to your mother's. Later that night, after Harlan had fallen asleep beside me, I found myself thinking about my conversation with Caleb. He'd asked what living would look like for me, and I'd given some vague answer about adventure and meaningful conversations. But the real answer was simpler. Living would mean being seen, being valued for who I was, not just what I could do for other people. My phone buzzed softly. Another text from Caleb. I can't stop thinking about our conversation today. You're remarkable, Evadne. Remarkable. When was the last time anyone had called me remarkable? I typed back, thank you. I enjoyed talking with you too. Would you like to do it again tomorrow? I stared at the message for a long time. This was definitely crossing a line. But as I looked at Harlan, dead to the world beside me, snoring softly with his mouth open, I felt a surge of resentment. Why should I feel guilty about having an actual conversation with someone who appreciated my company? Yes, I typed. Same time. Perfect. Sleep well, beautiful. I deleted the entire conversation and put my phone away, but I couldn't delete the warm feeling in my chest. For the first time in years, someone thought I was worth pursuing. Over the next week, Caleb and I fell into a routine. Coffee in the afternoons, long texts in the evenings after Harlan went to sleep. He told me about his travels, his work, his philosophy about seizing life instead of letting it pass by. I found myself sharing things I hadn't talked about in years: my college dreams of becoming a journalist, my love of poetry, my secret desire to travel to places that existed more in my imagination than on any map. "You're wasted in that office," he told me one afternoon, "and frankly, you're wasted in that marriage." "Don't," I said quickly. "Harlan is a good father. He provides for us." "Providing isn't the same as loving, Evadne. When was the last time he made you feel like the most important person in his world?" I couldn't answer because I couldn't remember. "You deserve to be someone's priority," Caleb continued, "not their afterthought." That evening, I tried to talk to Harlan about us, about our relationship, about the growing distance between us, but he was distracted by work emails, responding with non-committal hums while I poured my heart out. "Are you even listening to me?" I finally asked. "Of course I'm listening. You're talking about us, our relationship." He set down his phone with obvious reluctance. "What about it? When did we stop connecting? When did we become just roommates who happen to share children?" "I don't know what you want from me, Eve. I work hard to support this family. I'm here every night. I don't drink too much or gamble or run around with other women. What more do you want?" "I want you to want me," I said quietly. "I want to feel like your wife, not just your business partner in child-rearing." "That's not fair. Just because I'm not constantly declaring my feelings doesn't mean I don't care about you." But that was exactly the problem. He cared about me the way he cared about his car or his lawn, something that needed maintenance to keep functioning properly. There was no passion, no romance, no sense that I was special to him in any way that couldn't be replaced by another reasonably competent woman. "Never mind," I said, picking up my book. "Forget I said anything." "Eve, don't be like this." "Like what? Disappointed that my husband treats me like a household appliance? Now you're being dramatic." That word again. Dramatic. As if wanting to feel loved and desired by my own husband was somehow unreasonable. My phone buzzed with a text from Caleb. "Thinking about you. Hope you're having a better evening than you expected." I glanced at Harlan, who had already returned to his emails, our conversation forgotten. Then I typed back, "Not particularly, but talking to you always makes things better. You deserve so much more than you're getting, beautiful. I hope you know that." I did know that. For the first time in years, I was starting to believe I deserved more than just enough. The next afternoon, Caleb was waiting for me at our usual table, but something was different about his demeanor, more intense, more focused. "I have a confession," he said after we'd ordered our coffee. "Oh?" "I've been looking forward to seeing you all day. Actually, I've been looking forward to seeing you since the moment you left yesterday." My cheeks flushed. "Caleb, I know this is complicated. I know you're married, but I can't pretend I don't have feelings for you." The words hung between us, dangerous and thrilling. This was the moment I should have gotten up and walked away. This was the moment I should have chosen my family, my stability, my safe suburban life. Instead, I reached across the table and touched his hand. "I have feelings for you too," I whispered. He turned his hand over, interlacing our fingers. "So what do we do about it?" I looked down at our joined hands, at my wedding ring catching the afternoon light. Then I looked back at his eyes, dark and full of promise. "I don't know," I said. "But I'm tired of pretending I don't want to find out." The family dinner at Margot and Peter Greer's house was exactly as excruciating as I'd expected. Harlan's mother had prepared her usual spread of pot roast and vegetables, and she'd invited Harlan's sister Tara to join us, which meant I'd be outnumbered 3-1 in any conversation. "Evadne, you look tired," Margot said the moment we walked through the door, her sharp eyes taking in my appearance with obvious disapproval. "Are you getting enough sleep?" "I'm fine, thank you," I replied, forcing a smile. The truth was, I had been losing sleep, but not for the reasons she'd assume. I'd been staying up late texting with Caleb, having the kinds of deep conversations I'd forgotten were possible. Mum's been working really hard, Ava chimed in helpfully. She's been staying at the office later, and she seems happier. Harlan looked at me sharply. Happier? Kids notice everything, Tara said with a laugh that didn't reach her eyes. Don't they, Evadne? Peter, ever the peacekeeper, ushered us into the dining room before the tension could escalate. But I could feel Margot's eyes on me throughout dinner, watching my every move like she was gathering evidence for some future trial. So, Harlan tells us work has been busy for both of you, Peter said, clearly trying to steer the conversation to safer ground. Yes, we've had several new clients recently, I replied. It's been stimulating. Stimulating? Margot raised an eyebrow. I wouldn't think office administration would be particularly stimulating. The condescension in her voice made my jaw clench. You'd be surprised. Some of our clients have very interesting backgrounds. What kind of backgrounds? Tara asked. I thought about Caleb, his stories of living in different cities, his work in private investigation, the hint of danger that made him so compelling. Just people who've lived more adventurous lives than most. Adventure is overrated, Margot said firmly. Stability and commitment, those are what matter in life. Right, Harlan? Absolutely, Harlan agreed, reaching over to squeeze my hand. We've built a good, stable life together. His touch, meant to be reassuring, felt suffocating. I pulled my hand away, under the pretense of reaching for my water glass. Of course, I said, stability. But even as I said the words, I was thinking about Caleb's text from that morning. Good morning, beautiful. Hope your day is as amazing as you are. When was the last time Harlan had called me beautiful? When was the last time he'd sent me a message just because he was thinking about me? Are you all right, dear? Peter asked. You seem distracted. Just thinking about work, I lied. We have a big project coming up. Nothing that should interfere with family time, I hope, Margot said pointedly. Of course not, Harlan answered for me. Family always comes first. The irony wasn't lost on me. Harlan's work had interfered with family time countless evenings, but my job was somehow expected to remain completely separate from our personal life. After dinner, while the men watched a baseball game and the kids played in the backyard, I found myself trapped in the kitchen with Margot and Tara, helping with dishes. You know, Margot said, scrubbing a plate with unnecessary force. I've been married to Peter for 38 years. That's wonderful, I replied, though I wondered where this was heading. 38 years of putting family first, of supporting my husband's career, of being present for my children. It hasn't always been exciting, but it's been meaningful. I'm sure it has. Marriage isn't about excitement, Evadne. It's about commitment, about showing up every day, even when you don't feel like it. Tara nodded in agreement. Harlan is such a good man. He works so hard to provide for you and the kids. I know he does, I said, my patience wearing thin. I work hard too. Of course you do, Margot said in a tone that suggested she thought otherwise. But a woman's primary responsibility is to her family. Everything else is secondary. Even her own happiness. The words slipped out before I could stop them. Both women stared at me. Tara set down her dish towel. What's that supposed to mean? She asked. Nothing. Don't you think people deserve to be happy? Happiness comes from fulfilling your responsibilities, Margot said firmly. From building something meaningful with the person you've committed to, not from chasing fantasies. Who said anything about fantasies? I'm just saying, Margot continued, that some women get restless and start thinking the grass is greener somewhere else. But that's usually just selfishness disguised as self-discovery. Her words hit too close to home, and I felt my defenses rising. Maybe some women get restless because they're not being appreciated or valued in their marriages. Appreciated? Tara's voice rose. Harlan adores you. He talks about you constantly, worries about your happiness, tries to give you everything you need. He tries to give me everything he thinks I need, I corrected. That's not the same thing. What more could you possibly want? Margot demanded. A beautiful home, healthy children, a husband who's faithful and hard-working and devoted to his family. I want to feel alive, I said quietly. I want to feel like I matter for who I am, not just what I do. That's the most selfish thing I've ever heard, Margot snapped. You have 2 children who need their mother to be present, not off chasing some midlife crisis. I'm not having a midlife crisis. Then what would you call this attitude, this sudden dissatisfaction with a perfectly good life? I'd call it growing up, I shot back. I'd call it realizing that I deserve more than just being taken for granted. Taken for granted? Tara stepped closer to me. Do you have any idea how lucky you are? Do you know how many women would kill to have what you have? Then maybe one of them should have married your brother instead. The silence that followed was deafening. Both women stared at me like I'd slapped them, and I realized I'd gone too far. But instead of apologizing, I felt a surge of liberation. Finally, I'd said what I'd been thinking for years. I think, Margot said slowly, that you need to take a long, hard look at your priorities, young lady. Maybe I will, I replied, untying my apron. Maybe it's time I started putting myself first for once. I walked out of the kitchen, leaving them standing there in shocked silence. In the living room, Harlan looked up from the game with concern. Everything okay? You look upset. I'm fine, I lied. Just tired. Can we go home? Sure, of course. He stood up immediately, always eager to avoid conflict. Kids, time to go. The drive home was tense and quiet. Harlan kept glancing at me, clearly wanting to ask what had happened but not wanting to start another argument. The kids sensed the tension and stayed unusually quiet in the back seat. Once we were home and the children were in bed, Harlan finally spoke. What happened with my mother tonight? Nothing happened. We just had a difference of opinion. About what? About what women should want from life. Harlan sighed. Eve, I know my mother can be traditional, but she means well. She thinks I'm selfish for wanting more than just being your wife and their mother. Are you? Wanting more, I mean. The question hung between us, loaded with implications neither of us was ready to address directly. Yes, I said finally. I am. More what? What can I do to make you happier? It was a fair question, and part of me wanted to tell him everything. About feeling invisible, about craving adventure and passion and deep conversations about life, about Caleb and the way he made me feel alive again. But looking at Harlan's earnest, worried face, I knew he wouldn't understand. He'd try to fix it the way he fixed everything else, systematically, practically, without any real understanding of what was actually broken. I don't know, I said instead. I just know that I can't keep pretending everything is fine when it's not. What's not fine? Our marriage? Everything, Harlan. Our marriage, my job, this whole suburban routine we've fallen into. When did we stop dreaming? When did we stop wanting anything more than just existing? I don't understand what you want from me. I want you to want me, I said desperately. Really want me, not just need me to keep your life running smoothly. I want to feel like your lover, not just your business partner. I do want you. When was the last time you told me I was beautiful? When was the last time you surprised me with anything? When was the last time we talked about something that mattered? Harlan was quiet for a long moment. I don't know. I guess I thought we were past that stage. Past what stage? Past being in love? Past needing all the romantic gestures. I thought we'd moved into the comfortable stage. Comfortable, I repeated. That's exactly the problem. My phone buzzed with a text, and I glanced at it automatically. It was from Caleb. Hope you're having a good evening. Can't wait to see you tomorrow. Harlan noticed me checking my phone. Work? Yes, I lied, deleting the message. Just a client follow-up. But as I headed upstairs to bed, I realized I was tired of lying. Tired of pretending to be satisfied with comfortable. tired of being made to feel selfish for wanting to feel alive in my own life. Maybe Margot was right. Maybe I was being selfish. Maybe it was time to embrace that. 3 weeks later, I was sitting across from Caleb in his apartment, a glass of wine in my hand, and my wedding ring in my purse. The transition from coffee dates to evening visits had happened gradually, each step feeling inevitable, even as part of me knew I was destroying everything I'd built over the past 12 years. "You did it," Caleb said, leaning back on his couch with a satisfied smile. "You actually left him." "Temporarily," I corrected, though the word felt hollow. "I told Harlan I needed space to think, that I was staying with a friend for a few days." "And the kids?" A pang of guilt shot through me. "They're with him. They don't understand why Mommy needs to go away, but Harlan said he'd explain it somehow." Caleb's apartment was everything our suburban house wasn't: urban, eclectic, full of interesting artifacts from his travels. Books stacked everywhere, artwork from different countries, a sense that someone actually lived here instead of just existing. "This could be your life," he said, gesturing around the room. "No more boring dinner conversations about quarterly reports. No more pretending to care about PTA meetings and soccer practices." "I do care about my children," I said quickly. "Of course you do, but caring about them doesn't mean you have to disappear as a person." He moved closer to me on the couch. "You're allowed to want things for yourself, Evadne." The way he said my name still sent shivers through me, like it was something precious, something worth savoring. "Tell me about your travels," I said, wanting to change the subject from my family. "You mentioned living in Chicago." "Among other places." His expression shifted slightly, becoming more guarded. "I've moved around a lot, sometimes by choice, sometimes not." "What do you mean, not by choice?" "Let's just say I've had some complications with previous employers. Nothing serious, just personality conflicts." Something in his tone made me uneasy, but I pushed the feeling aside. This was exactly what Harlan and his family would do: look for problems, focus on the negative, instead of embracing the adventure. "Well, you're here now," I said, reaching for his hand. "And I'm here with you." "Yes, you are." He pulled me closer, and for a moment, all my doubts evaporated. This was what I'd been missing: passion, excitement, the feeling of being truly wanted. But as the evening wore on, I noticed things that hadn't been apparent during our coffee dates. The way Caleb drank more than seemed normal, the edge that crept into his voice when he talked about people who had wronged him, the expensive watch and electronics that seemed inconsistent with his freelance consulting income. "Caleb," I said carefully, "what exactly do you do for work? I mean, specifically." "Security consulting, like I told you. I help people with problems." "What kind of problems?" "The kind that require discretion." His smile didn't reach his eyes. "Why all the questions, beautiful? Don't you trust me?" "Of course I trust you. I'm here, aren't I?" But even as I said it, I realized I didn't really know anything concrete about Caleb beyond what he'd chosen to tell me. And what he'd chosen to tell me was becoming increasingly vague. My phone rang, Harlan's ringtone. I'd been ignoring his calls for 2 days, but the guilt was eating at me. "Answer it," Caleb said, his voice suddenly cold. "Let him know you're not coming back." I can't, not yet." "Why not? What's keeping you tied to that boring life?" "My children, for one thing. Kids are resilient. They'll adapt." The casual way he dismissed my children's well-being sent a chill through me. "They're 8 and 6 years old, Caleb. They need stability. They need a mother who's alive, not a zombie going through the motions of suburban motherhood." Maybe he was right, but something about his tone bothered me. Like my children were just obstacles to overcome, rather than human beings I loved. The phone stopped ringing, then immediately started again. This time it was the school, probably wondering why I hadn't picked up the kids yesterday. Harlan must have handled it, but the thought of my children confused and worried made my stomach clench. "I should call them," I said, just to make sure they're okay. Tomorrow, Caleb said firmly, taking my phone and setting it aside. Tonight is about us. But I couldn't stop thinking about Ava and Noah. Were they wondering why Mommy had disappeared? Were they blaming themselves somehow, the way children do when their world falls apart? The next morning, I woke up in Caleb's bed with a splitting headache and a growing sense of unease. He was already up, talking quietly on his phone in the kitchen. I could only catch fragments of the conversation, but his tone was tense, almost angry. I told you I need more time. No, she's not a problem. Look, just give me another week. When he noticed I was awake, he quickly ended the call. Everything okay? I asked. Just work stuff. Nothing for you to worry about. But his smile seemed forced, and there was something in his eyes that hadn't been there before, something that looked almost like panic. Over the next few days, Caleb's behavior became increasingly erratic. He'd disappear for hours without explanation, then return in moods that swung between manic excitement and dark irritability. The passionate, attentive man who had swept me off my feet was being replaced by someone I didn't recognize. Where do you go during the day? I asked one evening after he'd been gone for 6 hours. Business meetings. I told you I'm working on a big contract. What kind of contract? The kind that pays well and asks few questions. His laugh had an edge to it. Not everything has to be scrutinized to death, Evadne. Sometimes you just have to trust. But trust was becoming harder to maintain, especially when I started noticing the way he looked over his shoulder when we walked down the street, or how he insisted we always sit facing the door in restaurants. Are you in some kind of trouble? I asked directly. What kind of question is that? The kind someone asks when the person they're with is acting paranoid and secretive. I'm not paranoid. I'm careful. There's a difference. Careful about what? About people who might want to cause problems for me, for us. The way he said us made it clear that whatever problems he had were now mine too. The thought terrified me. My phone had been buzzing constantly with calls and texts from Harlan, from my mother, from the kids' school, from Harlan's family. I'd been ignoring them all, but the messages I glimpsed were becoming increasingly frantic. Finally, I couldn't stand it anymore. While Caleb was in the shower, I listened to my voicemails. Harlan's voice, tired and strained. Eve, please call me back. The kids are asking for you every day. Ava cried herself to sleep last night. Whatever's going on, we can work through it, but you need to come home. My mother. Evadne, what are you doing? Harlan called me looking for you. Those children need their mother. The school principal. Mrs. Greer, we need to discuss Noah's behavior in class. He's been acting out since the family situation changed. Please call us back. Each message was like a knife in my chest. What was I doing? I'd abandoned my children to chase some fantasy of excitement and passion, and now that fantasy was turning into a nightmare. When Caleb emerged from the bathroom, I was sitting on the bed with tears streaming down my face. What's wrong, beautiful? My kids, I whispered. They're falling apart without me. They'll be fine. Kids are tougher than you think. Noah is acting out at school. Ava is crying herself to sleep. They're not fine. So go see them. Take them out for ice cream or something. But don't let Harlan manipulate you into going back to that prison. It's not a prison. It's my family. A family that took you for granted until you left. Maybe that was true, but it didn't change the fact that I was responsible for 2 innocent children who were suffering because of my choices. I need to go home, I said quietly. Caleb's expression darkened. Home? This is your home now. With me? No, it's not. I made a mistake. The only mistake you made was waiting so long to leave that boring life behind. That boring life includes my children. Then bring them here. To your 1-bedroom apartment? To this chaos? I gestured around the room, which was littered with empty bottles, mysterious phone calls, and an increasing sense of danger. We'll get a bigger place, start fresh somewhere new. With what money? You won't even tell me what you actually do for work. I do what I need to do to survive. Not everyone has the luxury of a suburban husband paying all the bills. There was venom in his voice now, and I realized that everything I'd found attractive about Caleb, his mystery, his edge, his rejection of conventional life, came with a price I wasn't prepared to pay. I'm going home, I said, standing up and looking for my clothes. No, you're not. He grabbed my arm, his grip tighter than necessary. You're not going back to that dead marriage and that suffocating life. I won't let you. You won't let me? I stared at him in disbelief. You don't get to decide what I do with my life. I saved you from that life. You owe me. I don't owe you anything. His grip tightened, and for the first time I was genuinely afraid of him. This wasn't the charming, passionate man who had made me feel alive again. This was someone else entirely. Let go of me, I said firmly. Evadne, don't be stupid. You go back there, and in 6 months you'll be just as miserable as before. Harlan will never appreciate you the way I do. Maybe not, but he'll never hurt me either. I'm not hurting you. I'm trying to save you from yourself. But his fingers were leaving marks on my arm, and his eyes had a wild look that scared me more than I wanted to admit. Let go of me. He released me so suddenly I stumbled backward. Fine, go running back to your boring husband and your suburban prison, but don't come crying to me when you realize what you've given up. I gathered my things quickly, my hands shaking. As I headed for the door, Caleb called after me. You'll be back, Evadne. Women like you always come back. I didn't answer. I just ran. Standing on my own front porch at 7 in the evening, I felt like a stranger approaching someone else's house. The key still worked, but everything felt different. The familiar sounds of dinner preparation, the kids' voices from the kitchen, Harlan's patient responses to their questions. It was like listening to a life I'd abandoned. I pushed open the door quietly, hoping to slip in unnoticed and figure out how to explain my absence. But Ava spotted me immediately. Mummy! She ran toward me, then stopped short, her expression confused. Where have you been? Daddy said you needed space, but I didn't understand what that meant. Before I could answer, Noah appeared in the doorway, hanging back uncertainly. He looked thinner than when I'd left, and there were dark circles under his eyes that made my heart clench. Hi, baby, I said, kneeling down to his level. Mummy's home now. Are you going away again? He asked quietly. No, sweetheart, I'm not going anywhere. But even as I said it, I wondered if it was true. Would Harlan even want me back after what I'd done? Eve? Harlan's voice came from the kitchen, cautious and strained. Is that you? Yes, I called back, standing up and smoothing my hair. I'm home. He appeared in the doorway, and I was shocked by how tired he looked. His usually neat appearance was disheveled, his shirt wrinkled, his face drawn with exhaustion. Kids, go wash your hands for dinner, he said quietly. Mommy and I need to talk. Once we were alone in the living room, the silence stretched between us like a chasm. I'd rehearsed this conversation during the drive home, but now all my prepared words seemed inadequate. Where have you been? He asked finally. With a friend. I told you I needed space to think. What friend? I called everyone we know. Heat rose in my cheeks. Someone from work? Male or female? The question hung in the air, loaded with implications we both understood, but neither wanted to address directly. Does it matter? I asked. It matters to me. I couldn't meet his eyes. I just needed time to figure things out. Figure what out? Whether you wanted to be married? Whether you wanted to be a mother? I never stopped wanting to be a mother. But you left them, Eve. You left our children without explanation, without knowing when or if you were coming back. The pain in his voice was worse than anger would have been. I'd expected him to yell, to demand answers, to fight with me. Instead, he just looked broken. I know I made mistakes, I said quietly. I know I hurt you and the kids, but I'm back now. I want to work on us. Work on us? He laughed bitterly. You disappeared for a week without a word, and now you want to work on us. I was confused. I felt trapped, like I was disappearing in this life we'd built. I needed to remember who I was. And did you remember who you were? I thought about Caleb's apartment, about the fear in his eyes when he talked on the phone, about the way he'd grabbed my arm when I tried to leave, about the growing realization that the excitement I'd been craving came with a darkness I wasn't prepared for. Yes, I said, I remembered that I'm a wife and a mother, that this is where I belong. Is it? Because for the past week, you've belonged somewhere else. Harlan, please, I made a mistake. I got caught up in some fantasy about excitement and adventure, but I realize now that what we have is more important. What we had, he corrected. I don't know what we have now. The past tense hit me like a physical blow. Don't say that. We can fix this. Can we? How do I trust you again? How do I know you won't decide you need more space the next time life gets routine? Because I learned my lesson. I learned that running away doesn't solve anything. What exactly were you running from, Eve? Because I've been sitting here for a week trying to figure out what I did wrong, what I could have done differently. The pain in his voice made me want to confess everything. About Caleb, about the affair, about how I'd convinced myself that I deserved more than what Harlan was giving me. But looking at his exhausted face, I couldn't bring myself to inflict that additional hurt. You didn't do anything wrong, I said. This was about me, about my own issues. What issues? I felt invisible, like I'd stopped being Evadne and become just Mom and Harlan's wife. I wanted to feel important, to feel like I mattered as an individual. You do matter. You've always mattered. But you never told me that. You never made me feel special or appreciated. When was the last time you complimented me, or surprised me, or showed any interest in my thoughts about anything beyond household logistics? Harlan was quiet for a long moment. You're right, he said finally. I got comfortable. I assumed you knew how I felt without me having to say it constantly. I needed to hear it sometimes. And instead of talking to me about it, you disappeared. I tried to talk to you. Remember the night I asked when we'd stopped being adventurous? You dismissed it as impractical. I didn't dismiss it, I thought we were past needing constant excitement. I didn't need constant excitement. I just needed to feel alive in my own life. And do you feel alive now? I thought about the terror I'd felt in Caleb's apartment, about the growing realization that I'd traded my family's security for a dangerous fantasy. I feel grateful, I said honestly. Grateful to be home, grateful that you're willing to have this conversation, grateful that the kids still want their mother despite what I put them through. They do want their mother. They've been asking for you every day. Guilt twisted in my stomach. How are they really? The school called about Noah. He's been acting out. Ava's been having nightmares. They don't understand why you left, and honestly, neither do I. I'll talk to them. I'll explain. Explain what? That sometimes mummies need to abandon their families to find themselves? That's not fair. Fair? His voice rose for the first time. You want to talk about fair? Fair would have been talking to me before you left. Fair would have been considering your children before you decided you needed an adventure. Fair would have been working on our marriage instead of running away from it. I flinched at the anger in his voice, but part of me was relieved. Anger I could work with. Anger meant he still cared enough to fight. You're right, I said. I handled this all wrong, but I'm here now and I want to make it right. How? However you need me to, counseling, therapy, whatever it takes to rebuild your trust. And what happens the next time you get bored? The next time you decide our life is too routine? That won't happen. How can you be sure? Because I'd seen what was waiting for me outside the suburban bubble, and it was far more dangerous than I'd imagined. Because I'd realized that excitement without security was just chaos. Because I'd learned that the grass wasn't greener. It was just different, and not necessarily better. But I couldn't say any of that without revealing the truth about Caleb. Because I love you, I said instead. Because I love our children. Because I finally understand what I was risking. Harlan studied my face for a long moment. I love you too, Eve. I always have. But love isn't enough to fix this. Then what is? Time, honesty, and a lot of work to rebuild what you broke when you left. I'm willing to do that work. Are you? Even when it's boring, even when it's routine, even when marriage feels like a responsibility instead of an adventure. Yes, I hope so, because I can't go through this again. If you leave again, for any reason, I won't be waiting when you decide to come back. The finality in his voice scared me more than Caleb's grip on my arm had. This was my last chance, and we both knew it. I understand, I said quietly. Do you? Because I don't think you realize what this week has cost us. The kids' trust, my trust, our family's respect. Your mother has been calling non-stop, demanding to know where you were. My mother, well, let's just say she has some very strong opinions about wives who abandon their families. I could imagine Margot's reaction. She'd probably seen this as confirmation of every doubt she'd ever had about me. I'll deal with the families, I said. I'll explain to everyone that this was my fault, my crisis, not anything you did wrong. And what about the kids? How do you explain to an 8-year-old and a 6-year-old that mommy needed a vacation from being their mother? The words cut deep because they were true. That's exactly what I'd done, even if I'd dressed it up as something more noble in my mind. I'll figure it out, I said. I'll make it up to them. They missed you at Noah's school play. Ava had to explain to her friends why her mother wasn't at the mother-daughter breakfast. Do you have any idea how that felt for them? Each example was like a knife to my heart. I'd been so focused on my own unhappiness that I'd barely considered the practical impact of my absence on my children's daily lives. I'm sorry, I whispered, tears finally starting to fall. I'm so sorry. Sorry isn't enough, Eve, but it's a start. We stood there in silence for a moment, the weight of what I'd broken hanging between us. Can I see them? I asked. Can I talk to the kids? They're your children. Of course you can see them. But there was something in his tone that made me realize things had changed in my absence. Harlan had become the primary parent, the one they'd turn to for comfort and stability. I was no longer automatically included in decisions about their well-being. Harlan, I said as he turned to go back to the kitchen, thank you. For what? For not giving up on us. For being willing to try. He paused in the doorway. I'm not doing this for you, Eve. I'm doing it for them. They deserve to have their mother in their lives, even if their mother doesn't always deserve to have them in hers. The word stung, but I knew I'd earned them. As I followed him back to the kitchen, where my children were waiting with questions I didn't know how to answer, I realized that coming home was going to be much harder than leaving had been. But as I sat down at our familiar dinner table and saw Ava's tentative smile and Noah's cautious hope, I knew I'd made the right choice. Whatever it took to rebuild their trust, to repair the damage I'd caused, I would do it. I had to. Because the alternative, the world I'd glimpsed with Caleb, was far more frightening than any suburban routine could ever be. After dinner, I helped with homework and bedtime routines, trying to slip back into the rhythm of family life. But everything felt different. The kids were polite but distant, unsure whether to trust that I was really back. Harlan was civil but cold, going through the motions of normalcy without any of the warmth that had once defined our interactions. As I tucked Ava into bed, she looked up at me with serious eyes. Mommy, are you going to leave again? No, baby, I'm staying right here. Promise? I promise. But even as I said the words, I could see the doubt in her eyes. I'd broken her trust, and promises from me no longer carried the weight they once had. Later, as I unpacked my things in our bedroom, I found Harlan sitting on the bed with a stack of papers in his hands. What are those? I asked. He looked up at me with an expression I couldn't read. Nothing you need to worry about tonight, he said, putting them away in his nightstand drawer. But something about his tone made me uneasy. There was a finality to it that suggested my homecoming might not be the fresh start I'd hoped for. Still, I was home. My children were safe, my marriage might still be salvageable, and the nightmare of Caleb's world was behind me, or so I thought. I woke up the next morning to an empty bed and the sound of hushed voices downstairs. Harlan's side of the bed was cold, suggesting he'd been up for hours. As I made my way to the kitchen, I could hear him talking quietly on the phone. "Yes, she came back last night. No, I haven't said anything yet. I understand. We'll proceed as planned." He hung up quickly when he saw me, but not before I caught the formal tone in his voice, the same one he used with clients and lawyers. "Who is that?" I asked, trying to keep my voice casual. "Work," he replied, not meeting my eyes. "Coffee's fresh." But something felt off. Harlan's work calls were usually about spreadsheets and tax codes, not secretive conversations about proceeding with plans. The kids were already dressed and eating breakfast, which was unusual. Normally, I handled the morning routine while Harlan got ready for work. "You're up early," I said to them. "Daddy got us ready," Ava said. "He's been doing everything since you went away." The words weren't meant to sting, but they did. My 6-year-old daughter had learned to be self-sufficient in my absence, and she was proud of it in a way that broke my heart. "Well, I'm back now," I said, sitting down beside them. "Things can go back to normal." Harlan and I exchanged a look across the table, both of us knowing that normal was no longer an option. Too much had changed. Too much trust had been broken. "I'll take them to school today," Harlan said. "You should rest, get settled back in." "I can take them. I want to talk to their teachers. Explain about last week." "I already handled that," he replied. "The school understands that we're going through a difficult time." There it was again. That sense that decisions were being made without me, that I was no longer automatically included in the management of our family's life. After they left, I wandered through the house, trying to reclaim my space. But everything felt foreign, like I was a guest in my own home. Harlan had reorganized the kitchen to be more efficient for single parenting. The kids' artwork on the refrigerator included several pieces about helping Daddy and being brave when Mommy's away. I was folding laundry when I heard a car in the driveway. Through the window, I saw a man in a suit walking toward our front door, carrying a briefcase and manila envelope. The doorbell rang, and I answered it with a growing sense of dread. "Mrs. Evadne Greer?" "Yes?" "I'm David Mitchell from Patterson and Associates. I have some documents for you." He handed me the manila envelope with the kind of professional courtesy that suggested bad news. My hand shook as I signed for it. After he left, I stood in the foyer staring at the envelope. Patterson and Associates was a law firm. I recognized the name from billboards around town. Whatever was inside, it was official and serious. I opened it slowly, and the first document made my blood run cold. Petition for dissolution of marriage. Harlan was divorcing me. I sank onto the couch, rifling through the papers with increasing panic. Custody arrangements, division of assets, spousal support calculations. It was all there, meticulously planned and legally precise. According to the documents, Harlan was seeking primary custody of both children, citing abandonment and emotional instability on my part. He was willing to allow supervised visitation initially, with the possibility of expanded access pending psychological evaluation and counseling. The financial arrangements were equally devastating. He documented every expense, every account, every asset we'd acquired during our marriage. The house would be sold, proceeds divided. My car would remain mine, along with my personal belongings and half of our savings account. But it was the evidence packet that truly broke me. Photos of receipts I'd hidden from restaurants where I'd met Caleb. Bank statements showing cash withdrawals I couldn't explain. Screenshots of text messages I thought I'd deleted. A timeline of my absences from work, cross-referenced with my claims about working late. Harlan had been building a case against me for weeks, maybe months. While I'd been lost in my fantasy of excitement and passion, my methodical husband had been quietly gathering proof of my deception. The most damning evidence was a series of photographs taken outside Caleb's apartment building. Me entering, me leaving the next morning, me kissing him goodbye on the sidewalk. I was still staring at the photos when Harlan came home from work. He found me in the living room, surrounded by legal documents, tears streaming down my face. "You saw them," he said quietly. "How long have you known?" "About the affair. Since the second week. About where you were staying. Since the third day you were gone." "You had me followed." "I had a private investigator document your activities, yes. I needed evidence for the custody hearing." The clinical way he said it was somehow worse than if he'd screamed at me. This wasn't an emotional reaction, it was a calculated legal strategy. "Harlan, please, we can work through this. I came back, I chose our family." "You came back because your affair partner turned out to be unstable and potentially dangerous. That's not the same as choosing our family." "How do you know about Caleb?" "Because I know everything, Eve. I know about his criminal record, his history of domestic violence, his current legal troubles. I know you put our children at risk by associating with him." The room felt like it was spinning. Criminal record? Assault, fraud, violation of parole. He's been arrested twice since you started seeing him, including 3 days ago for threatening his ex-girlfriend. I thought about Caleb's erratic behavior, his paranoia, the way he'd grabbed my arm when I tried to leave, all the red flags I'd ignored because I was so desperate to feel alive again. "I didn't know," I whispered. "You didn't want to know. You were so focused on your own desires that you didn't bother to consider the consequences. I ended it. I came home." "You ran home when your fantasy turned into a nightmare. That's not the same as making a mature decision to prioritize your family." He was right, and we both knew it. I'd only returned when Caleb's world became too dangerous for me to handle. "What about counseling?" I asked desperately. "What about working on our marriage?" "Our marriage ended the moment you decided another man was more important than your children's well-being. I never put the kids in danger. You abandoned them to live with a violent criminal. How is that not putting them in danger?" I had no answer for that. "The papers give you 30 days to respond," Harlan continued. "I suggest you get a lawyer. I don't want a divorce. What you want stopped being my primary concern when you left our children to chase your midlife crisis. It wasn't a midlife crisis, I was unhappy. So you decided to make everyone else unhappy too." The conversation felt surreal, like I was watching someone else's life fall apart. This couldn't be happening. This couldn't be the end of 12 years of marriage. "What about the kids? What are you going to tell them?" "The truth, that sometimes adults make choices that hurt the people they love, and there are consequences for those choices. They need their mother. They need stability. They need to know that the people they depend on won't disappear when life gets difficult. I won't disappear again. I learned my lesson." "Did you? Or did you just learn that the grass isn't always greener?" I couldn't answer that, honestly, without admitting he was right. "Harlan, please. I know I made terrible mistakes, but we can rebuild. We can make this work." "No, we can't, because I'll never trust you again. Every time you're late coming home, every time you seem distant or unhappy, I'll wonder if you're planning to leave again. I can't live like that, and our children shouldn't have to either." "So you're just giving up? After 12 years? "I'm protecting our children from further damage. You gave up when you decided Caleb Voss was more important than your family." The finality in his voice was devastating. This wasn't an emotional decision he might change his mind about. It was a calculated choice based on evidence and logic. "When?" I asked quietly. "When what?" "When did you decide it was over? When did you stop trying to save our marriage?" Harlan finally tells you when it ended for him. The moment he realized this wasn't a rough patch, it was daily lying and an affair, and that you were capable of leaving your kids for a man you barely knew. When you say you're the same person, he shuts it down, because the old you wouldn't have done what happened last week. Then he switches into legal reality. You have 60 days, but he wants you out sooner, so the kids keep their routine. You can see Ava and Noah, but only supervised at first, arranged through his attorney with a social worker present, because, in his view, you're a risk that has to be managed now. You insist you never hurt them, and he answers with the line that lands hardest: abandonment is harm, even without bruises. Upstairs, you find the folder, Greer v. Greer, with evidence, attorney notes, and a timeline so precise it proves he's been preparing while you were chasing chaos. Downstairs, you overhear him telling the kids the truth with calm care. Yes, divorce. No, it's not their fault. Yes, they'll see you. They'll live with him. When you come down with the suitcase, Ava asks the question that breaks you. Are you leaving again? And even your promise sounds shaky. You drive to a cheap motel, and 3 months later you sit in court while your lawyer argues for joint custody, and Harlan's side lays out the story cleanly. Abandonment, involvement with a violent man, deception, instability. The judge rules primary custody to Harlan, supervised visitation for you at first, with a path to unsupervised visits after 6 months of compliance and counseling. Outside, Harlan doesn't gloat. He says he never wanted this ending, but he couldn't gamble with Ava and Noah's safety and stability. He hands you the final decree and says it's for the best, and you realize he's right, just not for you.